Hey guys, it's Marshall Mathers IV here, back to you today with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be making a video today about the fact that the movie Incredibles 2 should have came out way earlier than it actually did. And I'm sure that many of you will actually agree with me on this fact, because it's something that you'd have to be a complete idiot or moron to disagree with. I mean, the first Incredibles movie came out way back in 2004. Good old 2004. November of 2004 to be exact. And then the sequel, Incredibles 2, which honestly was a pretty shitty sequel, or follow-up, in other words, to its predecessor, the first one, which was way better by miles, and the second one just seemed and felt like so much of a downgrade compared to the first one, which I think is unfortunate. Now, there are scenes that I definitely do like and enjoy in the second Incredibles movie, don't get me wrong, but the most thing I hate about that movie is the fact that it's literally a feminist propaganda movie for the sequel, making Elastigirl pretty much the main character, the main center of attention, the main focus, instead of it being like the first one where it was Mr. Incredible, and then later on have Elastigirl come in the movie and do her own superhero thing or whatever. But here's the thing. I would have actually not minded it if they made Elastigirl the main character for the sequel, if Brad Bird would have went with his original version for the first Incredibles movie. What I mean by that is the original villain for the first Incredibles movie was going to be named Xerax, and he was a villain, the original villain for the first Incredibles movie, and he was also the ex-boyfriend of Elastigirl, and he had a unhealthy obsession with her, and Elastigirl obviously like fights with him or whatever, not in the original script of the first Incredibles, but in like some of the comics of Incredibles, she does fight him. And he also has an aging problem where he would age too fast. And I think that Brad Bird already had just a perfect villain for an Incredibles 2 sequel, for an Incredibles movie follow-up to the first one. He could have easily, and he should have, used the original villain that was originally going to be in the first Incredibles movie, being Xerax. And it would have been a much more interesting movie, and actually would have made more sense of making Elastigirl the main character then, knowing that she would have had a past relationship with Xerax, and it would have also been interesting to see how that would have made Bob, or Mr. Incredible, feel that Elastigirl not only had an ex-boyfriend, but also that became a villain later on, and also has a unhealthy obsession with Elastigirl. And it would have been interesting to see the interaction between Mr. Incredible and Xerax and what that would have been and would have gone like. I would have been highly intrigued to see how that would have played out. And it pisses me the fuck off that not only did Brad Bird not use his original villain for the first Incredibles movie in Incredibles 2, but also the fact that he took way too long to release the second one. He released it in 2018. And you know how many years later that is after the first Incredibles movie? 14 years later. That is a long ass time to wait for a sequel for any fucking movie. And I think it's ridiculous, insane, and just outrageous that Brad Bird chose to be a fool and wait so damn long to release Incredibles 2 that so many people wanted for so many years, and yet he didn't give a damn. He didn't give a shred of a shit, and he chose to wait many years later to finally release the sequel, which wasn't even as good as the first one. And I feel that Incredibles 2 is also pretty overrated for a film or follow-up or sequel. And the only reason why it even made over $1 billion at the box office worldwide is because fans had been waiting for an Incredibles 2 sequel for many fucking years. So it's no surprise that the sequel would have made literally over $1 billion, which it did, because so many people, including myself, had been waiting for so many years, so long, for a sequel to that movie, which is by far one of the greatest Disney Pixar animated films ever. Especially to come out in such a classic time like it did, being in 2004. And, I mean, the 2000s were decent. They were almost as good as, like, the 90s or even 80s. And I love the fact that the first Incredibles movie came out when it did. But I hate the fact that the sequel took 14 years later after the first Incredibles movie to have came out or been released. I think that's bullshit. And, you know, I would have preferred the Incredibles 2 sequel coming out just 4 years later in 2008. But there was already a Disney Pixar movie that came out that year, and also one that's also a really good animated Disney Pixar film, being WALL-E. So it could not have came out that year. It couldn't have came out in 2009 either, because there was already a Disney Pixar film released that year too, being Up, another one of my all-time favorite Disney Pixar animated films. It couldn't have came out in 2010 because Toy Story 3 came out that year. And Toy Story 3 was such a good movie and should have been the very last Toy Story film, honestly, which I'm pretty sure we can all agree on, because the fourth one was just completely unnecessary and pointless, and the ending, even for Toy Story 4, wasn't even as sad or a great send-off that the third one had. And, I mean, honestly, with how good the ending of the Toy Story 3 film had, it would have been hard to top that anyways. And it's kind of hilarious in a way, because the only reason they even made a Toy Story 4 is so that they could reunite Woody with Bo Peep. That's pretty much the only reason why Pixar even chose to make a fourth Toy Story movie. Other than that, there's pretty much no other reason why they would have had to have done that. And also, Incredibles 2 couldn't have came out in 2011 either, because there was a Disney Pixar film released that year, being Cars 2, a movie which probably, if anything, should have never been made or released because of how shitty and just all-around garbage that movie is. And, I mean, I hate even the first one. But I will say that the first one was at least somewhat okay or decent. But honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate the first film. And someday I'm actually gonna make a video of how my version of the Cars movie would have gone, or how it would have went, in other words. Because 4 years ago I already made a video about the reasons why I hate Cars, Cars 2, and even Cars 3. But I want to still make a video about how I would have wanted my versions of each one of those three films to have gone, which actually would have made them not only way better, but would have made me like and enjoy those films way more, because I don't even really like or enjoy them at all. But 2012, there was no Disney Pixar animated film released that year. So I think and strongly believe that Brad Bird, at the very possible latest, year-wise, should have released Incredibles 2 in 2012, or in 2012, if you prefer to say it that way. And knowing that the first one came out in November of 2004, I think that it would have made the most sense to have released the sequel, Incredibles 2, in November of 2012, or 2012. And, I mean, honest to God, I am outraged. I'm furious as hell that the Incredibles 2 sequel took as long as it did to come out, no thanks to Brad Bird waiting so long like he did, but also the fact that the sequel was just complete and total utter dog shit. It was pure sewage compared to the first Incredibles film. I honestly would not even compare the first two, the sequel to the first film. It's not even a fair fight. The first Incredibles film blows the second Incredibles film way out of the fucking water. Way out of the damn water. But if Brad Bird had his head on straight and would have used the original villain for the first Incredibles film for Incredibles 2, and then that way have made Elastigirl the main character, which again would have made sense because she had a past relationship with Xerax, because that was her ex-boyfriend, and he has an unhealthy obsession with her, and he also has an aging problem. So that would have been a way better and much more interesting Incredibles 2 sequel or follow-up to the first film than the just complete garbage one that we got instead, unfortunately. And, you know, it's also kind of funny because the only really good thing about Incredibles 2 is obviously the animation is way better. But other than that, I mean, there's pretty much no other good thing about it. At least not in my opinion. And it's even kind of funny because when it even came out the year it did, in 2018, there was actually quite a bit of videos on YouTube of people bashing the shit out of that movie, as it totally deserves to be. And I was even surprised to see lots of videos on YouTube of people bashing it, and even their videos of themselves bashing it making lots of views and blowing up like they did. And you know what's also interesting about Incredibles 2, speaking of that film, which I'm sure many of you don't even realize, is the fact that originally Brad Bird even was going to release it in 2019, which would have been 15 years later. And the only reason why it didn't get released in 2019 and got released a year earlier in 2018 is because originally in 2018, Toy Story 4 was supposed to come out that year. But they started rewriting the script of Toy Story 4. Toy Story 4 was supposed to be more comedic or funny than it already actually is, because Toy Story 4 is a bit more like sad, if you will, because of Woody going away and pretty much saying goodbye to all his toy friends or whatever, and going with Bo Peep and just doing what they're going to do. But because the people over at Pixar kept rewriting the script for Toy Story 4, that's why they released that in 2019 and had to pretty much release Incredibles 2 a year earlier in 2018, instead of 2019. And there was even a meme when Brad Bird even first originally announced that Incredibles 2 was going to come out in 2019. There was a meme on the internet floating around, which is a quote from the first Incredibles movie, where Syndrome says to Mr. Incredible, after capturing him and sending missiles to go kill Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible's kids, Dash and Violet, Mr. Incredible says, "No, call off the bombs, I'll do anything." And then Syndrome replies, "Too late, 15 years too late." And fans were going to use that as a meme for Incredibles 2 when first hearing that it was originally supposed to be released in 2019, which, again, would have been 15 years after the first film, exactly. But instead it came out 14 years later. But, you know, that's not that much earlier, because 14 years later is still a long time to have to wait for an Incredibles 2 sequel. And, you know, if Incredibles 2 had came out in 2008, that would have only been 4 years after the first Incredibles. If it would have came out in 2009, that would have only been 5 years after the first Incredibles movie. If it came out in 2010, that would have only been 6 years after the first Incredibles movie. If it came out in 2011, that would have only been 7 years after the first Incredibles film. But because there were films that came out those years, WALL-E 2008, Up 2009, Toy Story 3 2010, and Cars 2 2011, but nothing came out in 2012, I mean, not that I know of, and 2012 would have been 8 years later. And I think that 8 years later, at the very longest or most, should have been how long fans should have had to wait, at the very longest and most, for Incredibles 2 to have came out and been released. And we should not have had to wait any longer than that. No longer than 2012. 2012, 8 years later, after the first Incredibles came out in 2004, should have been when Incredibles 2 should have came out. And the original villain that Brad Bird had for the first Incredibles, he should have used for the sequel. You know what I also hate about Incredibles 2 is the fact that the deleted scenes for that movie are even way better. I'm not even kidding. The deleted scenes, if any of you have ever seen them, and if not, I suggest you go and watch them, because the deleted scenes for Incredibles 2 are even way better than what ended up becoming the actual final cut of the movie. And it pisses me the fuck off that Incredibles 2 wasn't even, I don't know, perhaps longer than it already actually is, because fans already had to wait a really long damn time anyways. And, you know, knowing how great the deleted scenes were that I've even seen, and I was blown away by how much better the deleted scenes for Incredibles 2 are compared to even the actual film. And in my opinion, it would have made sense for Incredibles 2 to have had maybe a director's cut or an extended edition, because it would have been worth it, because Brad Bird already waited so damn long to release the second film anyways. The least he could have done is made a director's cut or an extended edition, and including all those deleted scenes from Incredibles 2. But sadly he didn't, and obviously animated films almost never have director's cuts or extended editions anyways. Most even live action films don't have director's cuts or extended editions either, which is very unfortunate. And you know what's also kind of fucked up on Brad Bird's part is the fact that he promised fans before releasing Incredibles 2 that fans would be able to see Frozone's wife, Honey, in Incredibles 2 before he ever released that film, like even years before. He promised, and apparently even people over at Pixar promised fans that, yeah, you're gonna see Frozone's wife for the first time ever in this sequel. And so fans were really hyped for that. But then the only scene that had Honey in it, Frozone's wife, got deleted, or cut, in other words. And some fans were pissed off about that. And that is another reason why Brad Bird should have just made and released a director's cut or extended edition for Incredibles 2. So that fans, including myself, could have seen that deleted scene with Frozone's wife, Honey. And I mean, I just think it's a pity that we didn't see that deleted scene, and that all those other really great cut deleted scenes didn't make it into the final version or cut of that movie, and were just pretty much thrown away. I mean, the fact that any movie has deleted scenes pisses me off, especially live action films, because, you know, what's the point of even having deleted scenes if you can just make and release a fucking director's cut or extended edition? Why even have such a thing as deleted scenes in the first place? Why should that even have ever existed? And I hate the fact that there are deleted scenes, or that those were ever a thing and that they ever existed, because there are a lot of times where I'll go look up a movie that I really like from my childhood or whatever, and I'll look at deleted scenes of it, and I'll see so many comments of people saying, this scene should have been in the actual movie. This scene should have been kept in the movie. This scene should have stayed in the movie, or whatever. And yet they didn't. And this is all the more reason why movie directors and producers and whatnot in Hollywood should have just never had or made deleted scenes, and should have always, as often as they could, made and released director's cuts or extended editions of their films. At least that's the way I see things. And anyways, that's all I pretty much wanted to say in today's video. I hope you all agree with me on all the things that I said in today's video, and let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts. Please like, share this video as well. But I'm out.